brothers. Last week, towards the end of Act 2, we're studying how the brothers sought to get rid of Joseph by first killing him, then throwing him in a pit, and then they sell him as a slave to a group of Ishmaelites who sold him to Midianites, who sold him to Medanites, who ultimately sell him to the Egyptians. Before we move on with Act 3 and Act 4 of the story of Joseph, I mentioned last week that I want to discuss, as we start class today, the conspiracy. There is a conspiracy going on, and we need to try to understand it a little bit. Not every part of the story of Joseph can we make peace with, because we're disturbed by a lot of it. But what we're trying to do here is understand where they were coming from. Again, we know they made a lot of mistakes. We know they did wrong. We know they sinned. But we're trying to understand how they came to these sins. Someone's saying that the sound is very low. Is it any better now? Is that any better? If someone could put on the chat. Okay, very good. Thanks. How is it that they made such mistakes? And where we take a close look here is we see that the Torah will tell us that Jacob suffers every single day that Joseph is not there. He's in mourning. He's in pain. He cannot be comforted. Now, his own children that are there in their house, they're seeing their father cry every single day. They know Joseph's alive. They can ease this pain. They can say, all right, we'll find him. We'll bring him back to you. Furthermore, as we said in last week's class, his own father Isaac, who is alive in the beginning of this story, also knows from Ruach HaKodesh, from the divine spirit, he knows that Joseph is alive as well. And he doesn't tell his son Jacob. Jacob is suffering with everyone around him knowing the truth, and this man's in mourning, and he's in pain, and he's in anguish. Let's make our question even stronger. Joseph, why doesn't he send an email to his dad? Dad, I'm alive. Now, we can say, well, the first part, he was a slave, okay. Then he was in prison, okay. But when he becomes a viceroy of Egypt, okay, they didn't have email technology. Maybe they didn't have the pigeon mail in those days. But you're the viceroy of Egypt. You can send a messenger somehow. You have power. You have clout. Your father is suffering. And God, why doesn't God tell Jacob? Why doesn't God let him know that Joseph's alive? Remember that tzaddikim have the ability to see things that are not in front of them. So why is it that Jacob's switch gets shut off? He goes dark, and he can't see that his own son is alive where everyone else around him knows? That's my opening question for tonight, the conspiracy. And so the Medrash talks about it, and the Medrash tells us that the brothers on their way home were concerned that one of them would weaken and tell. They were afraid that, hey, we all have to stick together here. Remember, all we're going to say is, we found this. Do you recognize this clothing? And he'll recognize it, and he'll come to his own conclusion. We didn't do it. We weren't there. We didn't witness anything. We just found this garment, Dad. And we all have to stick together with this story. They were afraid that one of them is going to weaken, that one of them will not be able to withstand the tears of their father and would break, and that would cause problems for all the rest. Now, you need to keep this in your mind frame. Number one, at this point, they thought they did a good thing. They thought they did a courageous thing by getting rid of Joseph. They thought they got rid of a threat to the family. Number two, they knew that Jacob would never understand or agree with what they did. He would never accept it. That no matter what, Jacob's love for Joseph would blind him to the point that he could never accept that what the brothers did were right, no matter what will happen. Number three, they knew that if Jacob was to find out what they did, he would curse them. and a curse by Jacob can have terrible effects on the future of the Jewish people. So as they're going back from this selling of Joseph as a servant, they're having this discussion amongst themselves. How do we secure that we remain together as a block? And we don't have individual permission to change this block unless we all come together and decide together to do it. It has to be unanimous, not majority. It has to be a unanimous decision to change the storyline. So what they're doing is they're making what's called in Jewish law a cherem, a solemn ban on anyone that would decide to tell. This ban, in order to make it, you need to have 10. They only had 9. They have 9 because there are 12 tribes of Israel. Let's start deducting. Joseph is not part of it. That's 11. Benjamin is not part of it. That's 10. He's still home. Reuven is not part of it because he's not with them. He's separated from the brothers. We have 9. You need 10. So what did they do? They said, if we're 9, we're going to include God in our ban. We're going to make God the 10th. Again, thinking that what they did, God would be proud of. And therefore, none of us would have the right to break the ban unless God and the rest of us agree that it's the right time to do. Now, clearly, if God says you got to change your plan, if they heard that directly from God, all 9 would go along with it. But 1 individual, 2 individuals, 4 individuals, 9 individuals could not do it unless they had all 10, which would include God. So now what happens? They come back home. They show their father the garment. The father begins crying. Shiva goes on. 7 days of mourning go on. 30 days of mourning go on. Months and months of mourning go on, and the father's not being consoled, and he's not functioning. He's filled with anxiety, depression, and grief. And they all huddle together, and they say, we got to change the storyline. He can't go on like this. We need to come up with something. We need to say we heard rumors, perhaps, that he's alive. We got to break the ban. But they're 9. And they need a 10th. They need God. But God did not agree to break the ban. How do we know? Because remember that Jacob went dark. Suddenly, Jacob can't see what's going on. If Jacob can't see what's going on, it's because God does not want him to know. God does not sign off, so to say, on this ban. God is keeping this hidden from Jacob. He does not want Jacob to know the truth. Isaac too knows that Jacob's Ruach HaKodesh, his spirit of vision, was lifted from him. And therefore Isaac too comes to a conclusion that this must be part of a bigger plan, of a greater plan, of a better plan, of a more godly plan. And he knows that the dreams that Joseph had are part of this. So somehow this will have a happy ending. But I can't divulge to Jacob that which God is hiding from him. As to Joseph, as I mentioned, the first period of time, as we'll see today, he was a servant, then he goes into prison, and then he becomes viceroy. Once he's viceroy, he begins to understand as well that this is part of a bigger plan. Why? The dreams that he had, it's happening. Remember, in the dreams, they're going to bow to him. He now begins to understand that all of this, everything that happened to him, this entire drama is part of a bigger plan by God. And he has to wait for God to send the signals when the next act of the story is about to begin. And so everyone is in on this, and everyone feels Jacob's pain, but the one that's controlling the story is God. And God has bigger plans. And yes, Jacob will suffer tremendously from it, but ultimately the joy that Jacob will experience on the reunion of Joseph and seeing the fulfillment of the dreams of Joseph and having that the Jewish exile in Egypt will begin in the most honorable of ways, that Joseph is the viceroy of Egypt, that Joseph has saved Egypt, rather than them being attacked and being led into exile in chains, is all part of this story of Joseph. Act number 3 of the story is what I call a side stage. Just like on Broadway, you have there's the main stage, and you also have things going on off on the side. Well, the Torah, when it tells this dramatic story of Joseph, gives us a side stage, a side story that has nothing to do with the story of Joseph, but yet does tell us a lot about one of the characters that will play a major role in the story of Joseph. It's also a very important historical story for us to know. At the same time, it's a painful story because once again we have one of the tribes behaving in ways that would perhaps bring some shame to us, to know that this is one of the great tribes of Israel. Not only is it one of the great tribes, it's actually the royal tribe. It takes place with the tribe of Judah, with the son of Jacob named Judah. And the Torah will tell us the story. As you see, the Torah will not hide the faults of its great ones. If one of its great individuals is involved in behavior that's unbefitting, the Torah will tell you the story and see how this individual responds to the error, responds to the sin, how they live up with the responsibility of making amends to the sin that they have committed. So before exile begins, and the story of Joseph is what leads into exile, the very first exile of the Jewish people, before the family goes down to Egypt. In that story of what I call Act 3, the seed of the Messiah will be born. The seed of the Messiah, which means before we even go into exile, God is already telling us that the birth of the grandmother and grandparents of Messiah has already been brought into the world. So that exile is only a temporary state. Now we're still in that temporary state. We're awaiting any moment for the Messiah to come to take us out of a temporary state and bring us into a messianic time. Now our Mashiach, our Messiah, is not from a virgin birth. In fact, it's from a sinful birth. And the focus of the Messiah is to elevate the world, which means the Messiah will come from a very low level and climb all the way up to be an individual that will elevate the entire world. So we're going to look at it briefly inside the text. Not too much. I'm not going to offer too many commentaries because, again, this is a side stage of the story of Joseph. We're really focusing on the story of Joseph. Just going to give you the storyline, and then we're going to move on to Act number 4, which brings us back to Joseph. So let me share the screen with you here. These are the texts directly from the Torah. Now it came about at that time, side stage. It's going on simultaneously. Joseph is now in Egypt. At that time, Judah was demoted by his brothers, and he turned away until he came to an Adullamite man named Hira. And there Judah saw the daughter of a merchant named Shua, and he took her and came to her. He got married. And she conceived and bore a son, and he named him Er. And she conceived again and bore a son, and she named him Onan. Once again she bore him a son, and she named him Shelah. And he, Judah, was in the city of Keziv when she gave birth to him. So Judah has 3 sons. Judah took a wife for Er, his firstborn, named Tamar. So his firstborn gets married to a woman named Tamar. Now Er, Judah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. He sinned in the eyes of God, and he dies rather young. So Judah now says to his second-born son, Onan, come to your brother's wife and perform the rites of the Levirate and raise a progeny for your brother. In Torah law, and we see this was even before the Torah was given, if someone from the family dies without giving birth to children, it is a big mitzvah for a brother to marry his brother's wife and thereby bring children into the world, and it's considered as if these are the children of his dead brother. In Torah law, we have it today that if, God forbid, someone passes away, gets married, they pass away without children, even today, it's a big mitzvah if the brother is single, of course, is to marry this woman. It says that the first child of that marriage would be considered the son of the deceased brother. If the brother is not interested, or the wife is not interested, we can't force this marriage on any of them, then they go through a process, and it's similar to a process of a divorce. It's an actual religious ceremony that they go through to separate from one another. So he tells his second son, Onan, you go and marry Tamar. Now Onan knew that the progeny would not be his, and it came about when he came to his brother's wife, he wasted his semen on the ground in order not to give seed to his brother. So he's not interested in bringing a child into this world that's going to be considered his brother's child. So every time that he would have relations with Tamar, he would withdraw himself before the semen would enter into her and spill it on the ground. Now what he did was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and God put him to death also, so he also dies young. Then Judah says to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. For he said, lest he too die like his brothers. He doesn't want to lose all three, so he tells Tamar, it's time for you to go home, and I'll ring for you. I'll let you know when Shelah's ready for this. So Tamar went, and she remained in her father's house. Now many days passed. Days here refer to years. And Shua's daughter, Judah's wife, dies. So now Judah himself is a widow. And Judah was consoled, and he went up to watch over his sheep shearers, he and Hira, his Adulamite friend, to Timnah. And it was told to Tamar, saying, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. Rumor has it that your father-in-law is going to be visiting. So she took off her widow's garb, covered her head with a veil, covered her face, and she sat down at the crossroads that were on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up. But as for her, she was not given to him for a wife. That Judah had no intentions of giving his third son Shelah to Tamar, and just told her to stay a widow. This woman Tamar, and again, I'm going to give you just a little bit of the commentaries from the Talmud, from all of the rich commentaries on this. They tell us that Tamar was a tzaddikus. She was a very holy woman that truly wanted to be part of the family of Jacob. That's what she wanted. And she tried with one son, and she tried with the next son, and then she's told to just go away, we'll ring for you, knowing that that's not going to happen. And so everything that she does in this chapter is really through this the sensitivity of this woman that really wanted so much to be part of the family of Jacob and constantly felt turned away. So she sees that Shelah had grown up, but not given to her to be her husband. Verse 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she covered her face. So he sees this pretty woman by the wayside with a veil. And he doesn't know who she is. She knows who he is. Remember, he's a widow now. So he turns aside to her to the road and says, get ready now, I will come to you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what will you give me that you should come to me? So he wants to make a deal. He's saying, I'm interested. You seem like a prostitute here on the side of the road. I'm in. And she's saying, well, what are you going to give me? And he said, I will send a kid from the herd. And she said, only if you give me a pledge until you send it. You're going to send me a kid. What are you going to give me until you send the goat? So he said, what is the pledge that I should give you? What do you have in mind? And she said, your signet, your cloak, and the staff that is in your hand. So he gave them to her, and he came to her, and she conceived his likeness. Then she arose and went away. And she took off her veil, and she donned her widow's garb. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of the Adulamite friend to take his pledge from the woman's hand. But he did not find her. So he asked the people of the place, saying, where's the harlot who was at the crossroads on the way? And they said, no harlot was here. We don't have harlots in our town. There's no such thing. So he returns to Judah and says, I didn't find her. And the people of the place also said, no harlot was here. So Judah said, all right, so let her take it. Let her keep it for herself. That's what she wants. She can keep it. Lest we become a laughingstock if we start looking all over town, where's the harlot? And there's no harlot. Fine. Behold, I sent this kid, but we didn't find her, so let's leave it be. Now it came after nearly 3 months. It was told to Judah, saying, your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot. Not saying his harlot, but just saying, hey, she's been fooling around. And behold, she's pregnant from harlotry. So Judah says, bring her out and let her be burned. If that's what my daughter-in-law did, kill her. He sends word. He's an honorable man. And he just lets it be known, if my daughter-in-law has been fooling around, a nerve, Shayla is growing up, I'm waiting for this wedding, and she's doing this, kill her. So she's taken out. She's going to be killed. And she sends a message to her father-in-law saying, from the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. Please recognize whose signet ring, cloak, and staff are these. Tamar is willing to go to her death. She doesn't say, hey, Judah, this is you. I'm pregnant from you, from my father-in-law. She simply says, do you know who these belong to? Because that's the father of the child that's within me, as we'll find out, children, plural, because she's pregnant with twins. What does Judah do? Judah clearly recognizes them. He knows what this means. He now remembers the story of the harlot on the wayside from months ago. He can close his mouth and not say a thing and let her go to her death. But verse 26 says, Judah recognized, and he said, she's right. It's from me, and this is all my fault, because I did not give her to my son Shelah. But he no longer continued to be intimate with her. And it came about the time that she was given birth that, behold, there were twins in her womb. And it came about when she gave birth that he, the infant, stretched out his hand. So the midwife took a band crimson thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. And it came about as he was drawing back his hand, behold, his brother emerged. And she said, with what strength you have strengthened yourself. And he, Judah, named him Peretz. Afterwards his brother emerged, the one upon whose hand was the crimson thread, and he named him Zerach. There's our side stage story. It is from Peretz, if we go down generations from Peretz, that an individual named David is going to be born. King David is a descendant of the relationship between Judah and Tamar, and their firstborn son Peretz is the ancestry of King David, which is the ancestry of Mashiach. And so, as the story of Joseph is unfolding in Egypt that we're going to get back to now, the Torah tells us a story about Judah. He went out of the way, so to say. He went away from the family for a while. The family blamed him for what was done with Joseph. The family blamed him for not rescuing Joseph. And he has his own struggles, and he has his own difficulties, and he marries someone and his wife dies, and his firstborn son dies, and his secondborn son dies, and he ends up sleeping with his daughter-in-law. He struggles greatly. But that teshuvah that he does in that verse, that repentance that he does publicly, lets it be known, my responsibility. I'm the father of those children, and this has happened all because of me. The ability of a great man to admit fault in public, when he had every opportunity because of his power to hide it, to sweep it under the rug, to let an innocent woman be killed, and yet he stops it, takes responsibility, and will go through his repentance that he needs to go through. Okay, back to the story of Joseph. Okay, so now we're going to read the chapter of the Torah that tells us, remember, Joseph was sold, and he's on his way to Egypt. What happens when he arrives in Egypt? Let's take a look at the text, and then we'll go ahead and explain in the greater detail. Verse number 1. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, Pharaoh's chamberlain, chief of the slaughterers, an Egyptian man, purchased him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. So, he's purchased by someone named Potiphar. Potiphar is part of the royal ministry. Some say chief of the slaughterers means he's in charge of the butcher. Some say chief of the slaughterers means he's in charge of the courts, and being that the courts slaughtered a lot of people, he was called chief of the slaughterers. Various different interpretations of the words, but we clearly know he was part of Pharaoh's ministry, part of Pharaoh's royal house. And that's who purchases Joseph. You're going to see a pattern with Joseph, and the pattern with Joseph is he always rises to the top. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and whatever Joseph did, the Lord made prosper in his hand. That whatever this guy touched, immediately there was blessings associated with it. And Joseph found favor in his eyes. And Joseph, served him. And Potiphar, appointed him over his house. And all that he had given into his hand. So Potiphar has this trust for Joseph. And although when you go and you purchase a slave on the slave block, they're really there to clean your floors, peel your potatoes, work your fields, take care of your flock, not so with Joseph. With Joseph, when Potiphar recognizes his skills, he makes him the butler of his estate, literally the CEO of his estate. He trusts him with everything. Now, again, you need to think of the circumstances here. When Joseph is being sold to a caravan of Ishmaelites, Midianites, Mennonites, he could end up in any part of Egypt. He can end up in some small little village being purchased by someone who tortures his people, right? There's no guarantee as to where he's going to end up. He can be in some village, he can be in some other city, but there are a lot of cruel people in Egypt. They know how to use whips in Egypt. We know that because we were enslaved there for 210 years. They know how to beat their prisoners. They know how to beat their slaves and their servants. But who buys him? Potiphar, one of the ministers of Pharaoh. Again, you're going to see this pattern. Joseph is always going to be cared for. And as the verse says in verse 2, God is with him. God is with him all the time. Divine providence plays a role in every single verse of this story. He's always watched over. He's always protected by God. And he's always with God. He keeps his faith, as we're going to soon see. So he becomes this butler, this individual overseeing this powerful estate. Verse number 4. Joseph finds favor in his eyes. I said this already. And Joseph, served him, and Potiphar appointed him over his house, and all that he gave into his hand. Verse number 5. Now it came to pass that since he had appointed him over his house, and all that he had, the Lord blessed the house of the Egyptian for Joseph's sake. The blessings to Joseph get trickled down now to blessings for Potiphar. Everything Joseph touches is blessed. So if he's going to be involved in Potiphar's investments, they're going to bloom as well. If he's going to be involved in his flock, they're going to blossom as well. And the blessing of the Lord was in all that he had in the house and in the field. And Potiphar recognizes this. This is a holy man. This is someone that's blessed by God. And he really enjoys having Joseph there. So verse 6. So he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. Gave him control over everything. All the accounts, all the investments, all the property he had. He's a wealthy man. Joseph, you are in charge of everything. I trust you. So he gives him the passwords to every bank account. He gives him the logins, the usernames. He gives him everything. And he knew nothing about what was with him except the bread that he ate. The verse says the only thing that Potiphar had that he held back was the bread that he ate. Now, what does that mean? So the commentaries say that's a euphemism for the only thing Potiphar says to Joseph you can't have is the bread that I eat. And that's a reference to his wife. You can have everything, but you leave her for me. She's mine. Hands off my wife. See, Potiphar knew his wife. And Potiphar is concerned about his wife, as we will see for very good reason. Others say the bread that he ate is referring to an abomination by the Egyptians, that they're not allowed to eat bread at the same table with the Hebrew. And we see that later in the story of Joseph as well. This seems to be this hang-up with the Egyptians. They don't sit and eat bread with immigrants. They don't sit and eat bread with Hebrews. Some say it means that all that Joseph really got paid for all of this was the bread that he ate, which meant he wasn't getting a paycheck for this. He was a servant still, but he was a trusted servant, and he lived in a beautiful mansion, and he gave him all the food that he wanted to eat. But it wasn't as if he was sharing the wealth of the blessings with Joseph. All possible meanings as to what that part of the verse meant. And Joseph had handsome features and a beautiful complexion. The Torah is setting you up for the next verse. The Torah is telling you what's about to happen over here. Remember, Potiphar says, hands off my wife. And the Torah tells you Joseph was a very handsome guy. He was really good looking. Verse 7. Now it came to pass after these events that his master's wife lifted up her eyes to Joseph and she said, lie with me. She has a crush on Joseph. She wants Joseph. In fact, the commentaries tell us every girl in Egypt wanted Joseph. It tells us that literally the girls of Egypt would climb the walls of Potiphar's estate just to get a peek of this new good-looking guy that's working here. Everybody wanted Joseph. The National Enquirer were doing stories about Joseph. Every story was about this new handsome guy in the house of Potiphar. Potiphar trusts Joseph. He says to him, I trust you with everything, just stay away from her. He knows his wife. He can see the way his wife looks at Joseph. And Joseph's this good-looking, much younger guy. And so she directly comes to Joseph and says, you're going to sleep with me. Now, she generally gets what she wants. She's a powerful woman. Verse 8. But he refused. And he said to his master's wife, behold, with me my master knows nothing about anything in the house, and all he has given into my hands. Your husband trusts me. Your husband has held nothing back from me. Your husband gives me access to everything. Verse 9, in this house there is no one greater than I, and he has not withheld anything from me except you, insofar as you are his wife. Now, how can I commit this great evil and sin against God? He talks about two things: loyalty to his master. Your husband trusts me with everything but with you. I can't do this to him, and you can't do this to him. Secondly, God. It's an important statement here because it tells us that Joseph is still this holy individual stuck in a very strange storyline, right? He's in a new existence. He knows something is happening because he had those strange dreams. He knows he's playing a special role in destiny and in the forming of the Jewish people because of those dreams. But he's also going to be a man with God. It's God that gave him these dreams, and he's not going to sin against God, and he's not going to sin against his master. Verse 9 is a powerful verse telling us the state of Joseph's thinking. You know what verse 9 doesn't say? It doesn't say he didn't want her. It doesn't say, I have no interest in you. It doesn't say, I'm not attracted to you. It doesn't say, I have no desire for you. He simply says, it's a sin. It's a sin against your husband. It's a sin against God. He's being honest. He's explaining to this woman who he probably deep down does desire, that I can't do it. I know you want it, and part of me wants it, but that doesn't make it right. Just because we want something doesn't mean that we have to give in to that temptation. Verse 10. Now it came about, when she spoke to Joseph day in and day out, that he did not obey her to lie beside her and to be with her. And so, again, commentaries help us to tell us it was about 12 months of seduction, of daily seduction, of daily really tempting him in every possible way, in clothing, in perfume, in how she dressed in front of him, in trying to be next to him and trying to brush up against him in any possible way that she can. She poured it all on and she was good at it. And this poor guy is trying to hold on to some morality in a very immoral country. And he's trying to hold on to the respect that he has, because he really does respect Potiphar, who could have made him into a regular slave like the other slaves, but treated him with respect. And he wants to show that respect back, and he wants to keep his relationship with God. Verse number 11. And it came about on a certain day that he came to the house to do his work, and none of the people of the house were there in the house. She planned this well. There was an Egyptian festival. The only one not attending would be Joseph, because he was a different faith, a different religion, and he was going to stay home and do his work. And she perhaps faked some illness and told her husband she couldn't go to the festival that day, and she was going to stay home in bed. And so on that given day that she planned this and plotted this, there's only two people left on the estate, two people left in the palace, in the mansion, Potiphar's wife and Joseph. No one else there. It is on that day. When it says in this verse that he came to the house to do his work, the Talmud focuses on those words, and there are two opinions in the Talmud. Rav and Shmuel, these are two great sages. One says, when the Torah says he came into the house to do his work, it meant to do the work that he did every day. The other opinion is to do his work. That was the day that Joseph felt weak and he was going to give in to temptation. There was no one there. It was 12 months of this, 12 months of constant temptation in front of him. And here is a day, there's no one there, it's just him and her, and he goes into the house. According to one opinion, he's going into the house knowing he's going to fail today. He's not feeling strong. He's weak. He's going to lose the battle today. Verse 12. So she grabbed him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And at that moment, he finds the strength within him not to say no. He can't argue with her anymore. His desire is too strong. So what does he do? He runs away. He leaves the garment in her hand, and he fled and went outside. So she grabs his robe, takes off his robe, and he's standing there. And he, as we say, he can't fight this anymore. And instead of arguing with her, getting into this debate, how could we do this? He realizes it's not going to work today. The temptation is too strong. And so what does he do? He flees. He runs for it. He just runs out of the house. Verse 13. Now it happened when she saw that he left his garment in her hand and fled outside. She's now humiliated. She's embarrassed. She almost had him. I was that close. I had his clothes off. His clothes are in my hand. Interesting as well in the Talmud says, where did Joseph find this superhuman strength at this moment to say no and to run away? Where did he get it from? And Rashi tells us that at that very last moment before giving into his own temptation, he saw a vision of his father. He saw his father's face. And that's what gave him the strength to withstand it. That's what gave him the koyach he needed, just seeing his father. It's interesting, they didn't say that he saw God. It said he saw his father. God sometimes is too abstract, right? We don't know what God looks like, so it's hard to say you saw God. But a human being that you respect, that you admire, whether it's a teacher, whether in Hasidic life it's a Rebbe, it's a tzaddik, it's a father, it's your Zaidi, right? It's your grandfather. These images you do see. They do come to you in your dreams. You do have these pictures on your walls. They do inspire you. We need human inspiration, not because these humans are God, but because we are human beings. And as a human being, we can be inspired by other human beings. People always ask Chabad Hasidim why so many pictures of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Because the picture of the Rebbe inspires us. It reminds us of what he taught us. It reminds us of the inspiration he gave us. It reminds us of the teachings he gave us. It reminds us of the words he said to us. It reminds us of the blessings he gave us. Yes, he's a human being, but he was a holy human being. And therefore, when I see his picture, it brings all types of strength and inspiration into me. That's what Joseph saw. He saw his Rebbe, his father, that image. And that gave him the strength. So now we're dealing with Potiphar's wife. She's humiliated. She's embarrassed. Verse 14. So she calls to the people of her house, and she spoke to them, saying, "Look, he brought us a Hebrew man to mock us. He came to me to lie with me, but I screamed out loudly. This guy tried to rape me." Because she's got the clothes in her hand, so she's saying the opposite. He takes off his clothes because he's trying to rape me. And it happened when he heard that I raised my voice, when I started screaming and called out. He left his garment beside me and he fled and went outside. She's claiming attempted rape. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. So first she lets it be known to anyone around as soon as someone was coming home from the festival. Do you know what happened today? Do you know what happened today? This guy almost tried to rape me. And she waits for the buildup until Potiphar himself comes home. And she tells him the same thing. The Hebrew slave that you brought to us came to me to mock me. Your slave, your friend, your CEO, your butler. Look what he tried to do to me. And it happened when I raised my voice and called out that he left his garment beside me and fled outside. Verse 19. Now it came about when his master heard his wife's report, that she spoke to him, saying, "Your slave did such things to me," that his wrath burned. What does that mean? You say, of course, you know what it means. He's furious at Joseph. His wrath burned. Let's look at verse 20, and then we'll come back to the end of verse 19. So Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were imprisoned, and he was there in prison. Anything strange about verse 20? If you're Potiphar, you're the head of the executions, right? In Egypt, they kill you if you have a pebble in Pharaoh's soup, right? You get your head taken off, right? If you serve wine, as we'll find out, that it wasn't good for Pharaoh, you can get killed for that. And this man attempted to rape your wife. He's dead. He doesn't go to prison. He gets his head taken off. He gets shot immediately. He gets killed within 5 seconds. He's a servant. He's an immigrant. There are no laws in Egypt that you can have a fair trial. You're going to need to bring witnesses. And not only that, read verse 20. Joseph's master took him and put him into prison. It doesn't say he called the police. It doesn't say he called his guards. It doesn't say he called any officers. It says he, Potiphar, took him to prison. He escorts him to prison. Which prison? Not the dungeons where you would think you would put a servant if for whatever reason you didn't kill him, where the king's prisoners were imprisoned. He puts him in the special prison where the king's officers are. Now let's go back to verse 19. It came about when his master heard his wife's report that she spoke to him, saying, "Your slave did such things to me," that his wrath burned. Know this, it doesn't say his wrath burned against Joseph. His wrath burned because he knew the truth. His wrath burned because he knew who tried to rape whom. He knew his wife. He knew his wife from the moment he spoke to Joseph, hands off her. There was a reason he was saying that. He knew his wife. And he knew exactly what happened here. But if he turns around and accuses his wife of the truth, he's humiliated in Egypt. Your wife tried to sleep with a servant over you? How does that make him look? So he's trapped. He's stuck. His wrath is burning because he's stuck. She was smart by telling everyone else in the household before he even came home what happened, so that everyone in the household is talking about this attempted rape of Joseph and Potiphar's wife. So the rumors have now spread all over Egypt. He can't now come out and say he's innocent, she's guilty. So he has to go along with it. But he likes Joseph. He cares about Joseph. He trusts Joseph. And so he protects him. He's not calling any police. He's not calling the authorities. He's not calling any guards. He's taken him himself. Where? To a place he'll be protected. To a place he'll be taken care of. Potiphar always trusted Joseph till the end of the story. Do you know that Joseph ends up marrying the daughter of Potiphar? Later in the story, Joseph will get married and he will marry this man's daughter. The woman who accused him of rape, their daughter, is who Joseph will marry. Because Potiphar always respected Joseph. He never bought into it. He always believed that Joseph was innocent. But Joseph is now in prison. This story is strange. Remember from last week, they wanted to kill him. No, let's not kill him. Let's throw him in a pit. Okay, no, let's not throw him in a pit. Let's sell him as a servant. Okay, we sell him as a servant. He ends up in the house of Potiphar. He's there for a while. What happens? The woman of the household tries to rape him. And he's now accused of rape. And now he ends up in prison. Verse 21. The Lord was with Joseph, and he extended charisma to him. And he gave him favor in the eyes of the warden of the prison. Remember, wherever Joseph goes, he rises to the top. The warden starts liking this guy. Wow, this guy's got charisma. This guy's got charm. This guy is brilliant. He's smart. So the warden of the prison delivers all the prisoners who are in prison into Joseph's hands. You know what, Joseph? You may be in prison over here, but you're the program coordinator. You're the director of the prison already. You're going to schedule everything. All the prisoners will come to you for their schedule of the day. And whatever they did there, he was the one who did it. He was in charge now, second to the warden. He's still a prisoner, but the warden already likes this guy. The warden of the prison did not inspect anything that was in Joseph's hands. He just trusted him. For he too recognized that the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made prosper. Interesting. First Potiphar, now the warden, later Pharaoh. Everyone that sees Joseph in action says there's something unique about this individual. There's something special about this character. This is where we're going to end our semester of the story of Joseph and his brothers. We're going to take a break for a few weeks. I'll send out an email when we're going to restart. You got to remember where we're up to, because now we need to bring this all together. What happens? How does this family get fixed from where they are right now, so divided to that one brother wanted to kill the other brother? How do we go from here and become one nation of Israel? How do the brothers reunite? How is there peace amongst the brothers? How do the brothers end up down in Egypt? How does the first Egyptian exile begin? We got a lot more to cover. It's been a pleasure having you for our full semester for the story of Joseph and his brothers. Please, again, I'll send out the email in a number of weeks when we're going to resume and start up all over again. If you forget any of this, they'll all be on YouTube. You'll be able to remind yourself of the stories if you forget any of them. And we'll get back together again in a number of weeks. I want to wish all of you a very happy Thanksgiving and a very happy Hanukkah. We got two wonderful holidays coming on, one on the secular calendar and one on the Jewish calendar, Thanksgiving and Hanukkah, both with very, very powerful messages. We should bring the message of Thanksgiving into our lives, as well as the message of light, the light of Hanukkah, the miracles of Hanukkah. Have a wonderful time, everyone. We'll join back together again in a number of weeks. Take care.